Hello everyone, welcome to Stories Lived, Stories Told. I'm Abbie, and today we have two very special guests on our podcast, Mom and Grammie.
Hi.
Hi. Honored to be here.
Thank you for being on the podcast.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to start asking a question that I want to ask all my guests instead of doing the typical podcast introduction of let me tell my audience who you are. I would like for you to tell us who you are. So, Grammie, who are you?
Well, let's see. First, I'm Jeanie, born into a family of 7 girls and 1 boy. Then I met this adorable young boy in high school. And married him and was blessed to have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. I now am blessed with 7 grandchildren, 5 girls and 2 boys. My life is good. I've had lots of adventure, lots of happiness, lots of fun, and I've been able to watch my grandchildren grow and learn and become, and my children too, which has been a real blessing. Me, I would say some of my attributes are I'm inclusive and I'm kind and I try to be listening. I'm forgiving and compassionate and excited for adventure.
Mom, who are you?
Oh my God, well, I'm in tears over here. That's sweet to listen to that report.
Alrighty.
Anne-Marie, Annie, Aunt Annie, different names that I love and appreciate. I am 53 years old and born right outside Chicago, Illinois. 3rd child out of 4, only girl. Thankful to have been born into this family. I adore all 3 of my brothers and my parents very much, and moved a couple times, but spent a good chunk of my life in Marietta, Georgia, right outside Atlanta. And so I still call that home because that's where my mom and dad still are. Although I have to admit that I have spent a bigger chunk of my life right outside of Indianapolis, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And also very blessed that when I worked my way up there, up north, or to the Midwest, I met and fell in love with my husband, Scott. And not too long after that, Abbie and then Sam came along. So that's kind of the basics of my wonderful journey thus far. So I have a college graduate and a sophomore in college into this year. And I have a job I love and friends I love and church I love and have had some great adventures in my life as well. I haven't traveled quite as much as Grammie and Grandpa have, or my mom and dad, who I also call Grammie and Grandpa. So I live vicariously through them, and I'm getting ready to live vicariously through Abbie on some more traveling she's going to do. So that's the basics right there.
Well, now I have another question because I wonder if both of you know that you did this, is that I asked you who you were and you immediately started talking about your relationships to other people, who you were born into, your siblings, your spouses, your children. Do you define yourself by your relationships?
Yeah, I think so. But I did add characteristics of who I am, because that's what I've learned about me. You know, many people define themselves by their careers. That's who I am, but that's not really who you are, or I don't think. Mm-hmm. But it's part of who you are, only part of who you are. But I think, what's the inside? But I think that's where we start. Because if you don't know where you started, what's your origin? I say family of origin, and that does influence who you are, I do believe.
Well, I think my relationships are so important, and so it makes sense to go by all the different roles that you have, mother, daughter, sister, grandmother, so it makes sense to me.
That's a great question about our answers. I really do appreciate that,
Yeah,
to stop. And perhaps part of, just because of where I'm sitting, where we're actually at my mom and dad's house, your grandma and grandpa's house, that's probably part of why. But relationships are huge to me. I'm not the kind of person that has defined myself by my career. I've had a couple different ones that I've enjoyed, but I am appreciative of where I've come from. My relationships definitely are. Now, if I was sitting at my house or in a neutral location, I wonder if I would have answered differently.
Yeah.
To follow up your great question to start with.
I think the job's part of it, probably, because that's one of the roles. But I think if someone asked me who I was, I would probably start by talking about the people that I loved.
Right.
So.
Relationships do help define us.
Yeah. Well, the thing I was thinking, too, before this conversation is that I'm excited to have both of you on here because CMM revolves around storytelling, and that's the whole point of the podcast, and I think we are a very storytelling family.
Yes.
But I don't know where that comes from. Was your family storytelling, Grammie? Starts with you, then?
Yeah, and Grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he brought that in. My siblings and I now, just like most families do when they get together, I noticed that with your brothers and you, Annie, we like to tell things that happened, or you like to tell things that happened when we would travel to Iowa or we'd take trips or whatever. My family of origin did not take trips. That just wasn't in the making. I don't think we were adventuresome, but that's one of the things that I love about Grandpa, is that he's helped me become more adventurous. So yeah, and I think I
definitely think of you as adventurous. So that's a surprise to me that you didn't always have that.
No, I did not. I watch you, Abbie, and I think, she has a dream, and she's going to pursue, is to the degree that she can, what she would like to experience. And I didn't know I could, or I would, or I should, and therefore the adventures that I've had with Grandpa, with my husband, have enriched my life.
The storytelling for me is something that I remember from my childhood, that every summer, so at least once a year for many, many, many years, we would travel from wherever we were living to Iowa and spend probably 2 weeks visiting. And my dad, Grammie already mentioned, my mom Grammie already mentioned that she is one of 8 and Grandpa's one of 9. My dad is one of 9. So my summers, I loved sitting around and listening to them tell stories. Now, I think of it as all my aunts and uncles, so it definitely happened a little bit over on Grammie's side too, but definitely then on Grandpa's side. Okay, so this is back in the day when kids, I think about this. Okay, I didn't have my own cell phone to sit in the corner and play games on while the adults talked, right? Now, we definitely went outside and I have a ton of cousins, so getting together was always like the adults sitting around talking and the kids doing, whatever yard games or sitting around and talking ourselves too. But I loved the lingering after a meal or just anytime I could be around and listen to their stories. And so my dad's family, it wasn't like he was cross-country traveling. He just had a lot of mischief and adventures in his hometown. And just with all those siblings, so just the different layers of stories, who did what and when so-and-so got in trouble. But it was funny stuff. So that was precious to me. Mm-hmm. And so now when my brothers all gather then, and you kids are sitting around too, then I love when we tell funny stuff. And like Grammie said, some of our best adventures definitely were on our road trips, which in this again was not fancy flying. This was load into the back of the family station wagon.
6 a.m.
Yeah, 6 a.m. or whatever time. And and we had like 20 hours to go to Iowa. And sometimes we would break that up and sometimes we'd go straight through. But something always happened, a flat tire or just, some kind of craziness happened. And then things at home too, games we used to play and the time that somebody's arm went through the wall or, or we let the bubbles overflow in the kitchen sink because we got distracted doing something else while the water was running to do the pans after dinner. And, I think I would say my love of storytelling / listening to people's stories definitely started in my extended family and probably our trips to Iowa. At the time, I probably thought I had to sit around, but now I realize, wow, that was amazing to be able to sit and listen to people's life stories. So,
yeah, there are so many people in our family, many of whom I've never even met, but I think that's relating the first point about defining ourselves by our relationships with the storytelling is that the storytelling that I always hear, at least, or I'm asking about, are the stories that happened before me. And so it's always about the people that came before me, whether they're, you two that I've directly am from, or the cousins or the other cousins or the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents and whoever else, that it's letting you know who and where you came from. That's what I definitely see happening in stories, because whether it's like from your childhood, Mom, or even Grammie and Grandpa's childhoods, and it goes way back by like all of them. It's history. Yeah.
And then I think about today that in all the steps of my life, like when I went to college and then first job and such, that I love to hear people's stories. I love to know where people came from because, since I was kind of transplanted around a little bit, and just the neighborhood that I grew up in, we moved here in 1970 something and everybody else seemed to be transplanted. Metro Atlanta was a growing area. So everybody was transplanting from someplace else. It really wasn't until I went to college before I was around people with truly Southern accents that came from, other parts of the state of Georgia. Like my neighborhood, there weren't a bunch of Southern people here. And obviously, my parents both born and raised in Iowa. So anyways, I just think perhaps when I went off to college especially, and then for the rest of my life, I love meeting people from different places and hearing their growing up was like.
Grammie, you want to tell us a little bit about the house that we're in right now? Because you say 70s is when you moved here? So 50 years later. This is the only house I've ever known you in.
Our youngest son, Paul, was 3.5. We moved in July. Was it?
No, we did. I think we moved here in 75. Actually.
75. It was 75 because Paul was born in 72. Thank you. And we had to stay in a guest quarters type place before we could get into our house. We couldn't get in till July 15th. And Annie and my birthday are on the same day, so we went to the baseball game. Braves baseball game, that was, one of our first adventures. So let's see, what were you, 7?
Yes. And so I turned 7 the week that we moved here.
Yes, right. So that was a start, and then we kind of knew who was going to get which bedroom. Joe and Mike had to share the bedroom. Anne got her own bedroom. Paul got his.
Was it new when you moved in?
Yeah.
Or had it? Okay.
Yeah, this was a just newly built house.
Yeah. So it really is like 50, almost 50 years old.
Almost.
Has it always looked the same? Because to me, this like dark wood fixtures and this carpet. What color do you even call this carpet? It's like maroon. It's like a deep red. This is just how I always picture this room.
It had brown and yellow shag carpet. And so did the bedroom.
Did you choose that?
Yeah.
That was good. It was a good look for the time.
For at that time.
That was stylish.
I guess so. I don't know. I know my kids eventually hated it. And then
Well, Mom said she had yellow carpet in her room and yellow walls.
Yellow?
You let her do that?
Yes, I did. They got to pick. Let's see. Lots of memories in the walls of this house. Lots of traffic through the house for sports and outside playing. One of the first things that happened, I think, before we even had pictures on the wall was a tree house for the kids, because we hadn't had those kind of trees that you could, build anything in. Pine cone bites, which I think were dangerous. Why would I have let you do that? Anyway, and then finding a church home, and we were blessed, lucky and blessed, I guess I would say, by picking the school district we did. Grandpa was busy with his work, and I was busy with trying to be a homemaker and a mom and a wife and all that kind of good stuff. And then I found my involvement in my church and helped create a curriculum, a 3-year cycle curriculum there, which I've always been very proud of. I don't know what else to say. It's just living. It's just living.
Well, my broadest question that I wanted to ask was, tell me your story. But I know that's so broad, and we've already heard parts of your story. What if we go back and we do it by time? Like, do you want to tell me a little bit about your childhood?
I think that one of the things that influenced who I am was I was the youngest of the first 5, and I was so-called the baby of the family for 6 years. In some respects, I'm a youngest child, but then I felt responsibility to make sure my 3 younger sisters did things how they were supposed to. So I felt responsible for that. My sister next to me that was older, she was my hero, and I was her protector, which probably doesn't make any sense, but that's the way I would say it.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Like, she was taller. I always thought she was prettier than I was, very athletic. But then she would lose her allowance, and I would give her some of my money so she could go to the movie. So that's just one example.
You looked up to her, but
yes.
You were actually also taking care of her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, exactly. So let's see. And then my mom got sick, and I won't go into details of that.
Sure.
When I was I think I was in 8th grade or freshman in high school or whatever. And a nice stories parallel in that regard. And then right after I had Mike, when I think I was 23 or 24 when I had Mike, my mom died suddenly, and that was very hard. But I had 2 little babies to take care of, and so, life went on, and Grandpa and I, kind of plowed through that. After, 4 years or something like that, my dad married. Annie danced at her grandpa's wedding, the second wedding. I remember that. I even remember the dress that she...
Like a choreographed routine?
No.
You just danced.
I was just out there on the dance floor.
On the dance floor, yeah.
But not everybody can say they danced at their own grandfather's
That's
wedding.
True.
Right.
Yeah. That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just I was little.
Yeah, you were like a year and a half or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know, but I just remember that as a cute memory. And I think there again, talking about being blessed, Grandma Dolores became my children's grandma. And for me and my family, I think that worked out really well. She and I had a good talking relationship, which was wonderful. Yeah, because that's where the message of God is in the mess and the bless comes from. Mm-hmm. And that's always helped me to deal with the reality of that life isn't all smooth and happy and joyous, because there's sadness and things that are difficult to accept.
What about your work? I don't know what your actual job title was.
Oh, yeah. It was after I had my adventure with sickness.
Late 80s? So, Joe graduated from high school in 82, so it was...
Oh, it was after that.
Yeah. So I would say a huge part of Grandma's work was not paid, right? The first part of, when I think of what my mom's work was, the very first thing was that she mostly volunteered. I think they gave you a tiny bit of money, but for many years at church.
Right. Yes.
And with a couple other ladies, and you loved it, and the curriculum that you referenced. Right. So that was a huge, huge thing. You and Dad both volunteered there as well, but that was work. And again, my life parallels you. I went through a chunk of time where I did not have employment outside of the home, but yet my need to feel like I was contributing outside of just my immediate family was so fulfilled by all the volunteer work I did. Right. So Grammie did volunteer work and that sometimes got paid for it.
I think after that illness, I think God directed me to do what I had always wanted to do, and that's to give care to the elderly. So my title was resident assistant. So what it was is to help elderly with their tasks of daily living.
In a nursing home?
Well, it was called a personal care assisted living.
Okay.
The people weren't so declined that you had to do everything for them.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have to ambulate from their room, walker, cane, wheelchair, whatever, to the eating area. But if they needed to have assistance to get their shoes on or pull their pants up or in and out of the shower safely, at that time we could deliver prepackaged medications to them right after they ate, help them make appointments, make sure they got into the transportation that they needed, make sure that their family was up to date with what we did. But before that, I worked in an office trying to get high schools and colleges to buy Britannica encyclopedias.
Oh, yeah.
And all those books up there on the shelf.
Yeah, you got the whole collection.
Right, yeah.
Those were very important before Google.
Oh, yeah.
I guess the other part of my story that's very significant is that I had a sister who died of alcoholism and mental health illness. Today I know that. And as a result of that, I found a recovery program. And I believe I was 37 when I found it. And I now have tried to live the principle of the 12 steps. And that has been another blessing, because it changed my life. I'm happier, more serene. That's where the compassion and kindness and forgiveness and empathy and all the good stuff comes. One of the blessings of recovery is to, whether it's in person or online these days, is to bless people by listening to them tell their stories or their circumstances and encouraging them to try to live one day at a time, and all kinds of other slogans that are helpful to people who sometimes live in chaos. That's a huge part of my story.
So for the past 40 years, have you been in the role of helping other people through their recovery journeys? Well, that's what you've done?
Yes and no. It's kind of like you help me, I help you. Mm-hmm. But there's something called sponsorship, where you become not teachers to each other, but not mentors, so to speak, but a shared journey of encouragement.
Because you found the program not because you were going through your own alcoholism, but because you were the family member of someone, and they were are helping the family members of people too.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
To help families and friends help themselves. You can't take away another person's illness. Mm-hmm. That's the good part and the sad part. But you can help yourself deal with situations in your life because you're affected too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the chaos which is just a good word. There's probably lots of words for it, but the chaos of living with someone and loving someone, whether it's in your home or just within your family, of someone who has alcoholism, can really destroy your own life if you don't learn ways to detach with love and other key concepts.
That's right.
And I think that carried over and blessed our family on so many levels, right? And for so many years, for you, and then Dad joined you on that journey at some point too. So the Al-Anon that you're a part of is all for the families.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There's other meetings for the people who are struggling with the addiction itself, but the families of people who love people who are in addiction. I mean, that's just huge. And like Grammie said, not always, but many times mental health is a part of people's struggle with addiction. And even if you're not an active alcoholic, you can still have so many struggles and behaviors. And so I think that's 12 steps, even though I've never attended a 12-step meeting myself for the families of, but everything that's been passed down to me has been really good, because I mean, life is chaos. I mean, this whether you've got addiction or not.
Right, you want to like apply those things to all areas of your life.
Exactly.
It's like be reasonable.
Yeah, and just the and that God is in the mess and the bless, which was from Grandma Dolores. But it's just so thankful for all the things that my parents learned and my grandparents learned, to pass down to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, while we're here,
Mom,
what is your story?
Yeah, so I too, just like Grammie said, that her mom became ill right about the same time that my mom, Grammie, became ill. When I was in 8th grade, Grammie had a couple, some back issues and some other things. And I think it was when I was in 9th grade that they actually said, all right, they told her, my mom, that she had a year to live because they thought she had cancer in her pancreas, which back 40 years ago, that was definitely a death sentence. That was, there wasn't anything. And a few months later, they're like, "Oh, just kidding. I don't think you have cancer of your pancreas. You had something there, and now it looks like it's moved, and maybe it was just pancreatitis." And so then that was a whole journey to come out of that too. At that time, I felt very responsible for Paul, my youngest brother. So when all that was happening, Joe, the oldest, had just graduated high school and moving on to college, and Mike was a junior in high school and had a job and was very busy doing those things. So in a way, it was still just kind of Paul and I at home, and Paul was in 5th grade, I think. So I felt responsibility for Paul too. So that was kind of part of my life journey, and kind of a shifting time, in my life too, of growing up in a way. One of the things I think about too then was that I always wanted to make everybody feel good, whether they were coming, and then Grammie's sisters came to visit her, and, so they flew in, and I would go down to the airport and pick them up with Grandpa. Like, we had a series of, like, every Saturday night we went to the same gate to pick up family flying from Cedar Rapids to Atlanta. It was our Saturday night routine. We'd go pick somebody up, and then I would just want to make them feel comfortable and happy. And if somebody, we were so blessed. Oh my gosh, we got so many meals and casseroles, and people from the neighborhood and from church that loved Mom and loved us, and I would always want to try to be funny. So we had a lot of wonderful care from Grammie's family and friends and everything. But so it was a kind of a shifting time in my life journey too. And I think too, I will say one awesome thing that came out of that is that I think that's when we started to say that I love you out loud.
Yes.
I don't think that those were words that we spoke. And I knew there were some other families, like my friend would say it to her mom, and I remember thinking, wow, we don't say that in my house. And then when Grammie got sick, and we thought we weren't going to have her for these 40 more years we've had her.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Oh my
Lord.
gosh.
But that's when we started saying I love you.
There was more expression of love and hugging. Yeah, which I didn't grow up with.
Yeah.
Grandpa saw his parents kiss daily, and I think I can remember once that we saw my parents kiss. And so there was no expression of affection. And part of it, I always thought part of it was generational, and yeah, maybe. But, well, there's a lot of blessings that came from that whole journey. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because Annie helped me by what she said, realized that it was okay to let go and go to heaven if that's what needed to happen.
She told you that?
She did.
Oh.
She said, I don't want you to go because I don't want to lose you. But then I think, well, maybe I'm being selfish. But then I think of all the people that love you that are waiting.
Well, I'm glad you stuck around.
Yeah, me too. I wouldn't want to miss all this fun.
No, just all those adventures for.
Yes, and you too.
Yeah,
now
too.
that's part of your story.
Yeah,
because you got sick when.
Yeah,
I was in 5th grade.
You're a little early.
I was a little early on that.
Yeah.
Well, I had you a lot later than Grammie had me.
Oh, that's
right.
Yeah, that's true.
But still.
Yeah.
It's still. I mean, all three of our lives parallel on that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I think.
I don't know exactly when my mom and dad, your Grammie and Grandpa, started using the phrase "someday is now."
Yes.
I think that has blessed me. I mean, that's actually why we came to Atlanta this weekend, was to make sure, like, hey, let's just get on a plane and come see Grammie before you do your traveling. So someday is now, and those words have helped me, and it's really neat to see too that we used to have some dear friends in Indianapolis, and they took a trip actually to Paris. They decided to do it and said that they were motivated by Grammie and Grandpa's life motto of "someday is now," and so that's fun to think about how your words expand beyond just your family, that you share, because they Anna and Chris are dear friends that they have met Grammie and Grandpa at different times, and they're deep family friends, and so they know my story and they know Grammie and Grandpa's story, and then how that becomes part of their story and their decision making too when you hear other people. So anyways.
One of the things that Anne's mantra was another day to love and be loved.
Oh yeah, thank you God. Yes.
Yeah, and she says that a lot, and that's a good thing to remember too.
When did you start saying that, Mom?
I got that out of a devotional book that
was after she was sick.
Yeah, the devotional book was given to me by my friend Cindy, because her mother-in-law had an entry in this devotional book about 90 days of cancer journey and devotions to encourage people during that. And so there was I don't remember the author's name of the exact devotion within there, but she said, thank you, God, for this simple gift of another day to love and be loved.
What else, Mama?
Oh my goodness. I think I will always appreciate the fact too that I saw my mom and dad having the desire to travel. And I just thought they were so cool because, they lived in so many places, right? That they, got in the car the day, they got married on a Tuesday, and because Grandpa graduated from college on a Sunday, so they got married on a Tuesday because the following Monday was his first day of his first job in New York. And then, they lived 2 places in New York State, and 2 places around Chicago. And then we lived in Lenexa, Kansas. And then they moved here. And I thought that was so cool. And we were all born in different places. And I thought we were really cool because of that. And we would, do our little travels. And we did whitewater rafting from the Carolinas to Tennessee and West Virginia, and then we went out to Colorado. And so we had those kind of, we didn't like fly to Europe, which is awesome too.
Sure.
But we didn't do that, but we did all kinds of stuff, and that opened up my world.
Right.
I have to say, even when I was done with college, then I took my own little adventure, across the United States for my first job.
Yeah.
And I love that. And then that's what got me to Indiana.
That really expanded your world, didn't it?
Yeah.
The travel.
When I was a senior in high school, my parents' very best friend died suddenly, unexpectedly. And that was kind of a turning point for me as far as I had considered going out of state to college. Mm-hmm. And I immediately was like, I don't even think I probably said that out loud. It just within me was like, well, now I'm not going to leave. How in the world? And
was that coming back up of you wanting to still take care of people and make people comfortable?
Yes, I would think so. Yeah.
Just seeing the themes emerge.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I, went to school just downtown at Georgia Tech. And then I think, 4 years later, then I did travel for my first job out of school, and which I kind of think relates to you, that when you went off to college, you only looked within state.
Yeah.
Right? And for probably various reasons, but you looked in state. And then ever since you got your first taste of being able to travel out of the country, you've wanted to go back. And so very exciting that, 4 years later, you're going. I think that if I may say, that your desire to travel comes from, these fine people sitting right here who raised me and influenced me. So anyways, I think that's an exciting part of your life, and it's been a part of my life that I have really appreciated. So for 2 years I traveled across the United States for my job, and I loved all the different places that I got to go. And then my first job after that travel had me settle in the Indianapolis area. And then, I found a community within my church that meant so much to me, and friendships and such. And honestly, Indianapolis is less expensive to live in than Atlanta. And I could get home very inexpensively with very inexpensive flights. And my parents were good and came to see me, and back and forth. And so Indiana didn't seem that far away.
Yeah.
And so I've had a wonderful life outside of Indianapolis there. And I wouldn't change it. There's events and things that I have missed, but I also think that living far away has also helped me to appreciate so deeply every moment I do have, and to make the effort to stay connected.
I was wondering, just thinking about the 3 generations we have right here, Grammie, you, and me. I know Grammie has this experience previously, but in terms of the 3 of us, what's it like to be a daughter and a mother right now?
Yes, very interesting. I mean, I love it. And it's, and I had always heard people talk about some of the wonderful speakers I've heard in my life talking about when you are a parent and you have children, but then your parents are still living, and sometimes people refer to that as being sandwiched, or kind of you might be in the sandwich stage of life, or a sandwich generation, or things like that. And so it is fascinating on a grander scale, and then even just on like a moment to moment decision, and even just the decision to travel, and like, I want to see Grammie, I want you to see Grammie, and that's so important for us, but what works best for Grandma and what works best for you, and just so especially when it comes to, I think, like a moment like a graduation or some, or something. Just, it's definitely the one thing I'd love to say is that after you were born, and you and then Sam, and then as you two kept growing up, I definitely have called my parents many a times and said, thank you. And I'm sorry. And because I know, I understand. You talk about perspective.
Yeah.
You talk about perspective. Becoming a parent makes you see your parents in a totally different way. And so parenting you and Sam has made me love my parents even more.
That's beautiful.
And appreciate them, and realize that, as I tell you, Abbie, I'm like, okay, so your dad and I are far from perfect. but living from a place of love, and I can look at my parents and say, like, absolutely. I mean, are there a few things they did that I wish they didn't? Yeah, probably. And, but, said or done, or definitely, just, do I wish that things had been different at times? Of course. But when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was pure out of love. So I don't have anger. I have appreciation.
Yeah. That's a good sentence.
Definitely.
Yeah, can I say something about the, being the mother? Yeah, you want to make the things that are difficult for your child, you want to help them through it. There's a few things that I remember with Joe because he was so hard to speak up for himself. And there was a few times when I just didn't do anything. And eventually he did speak up for himself. So that was a good lesson for me. But then also on the other side of that is watching and learning from my children and watching them do some things differently in what I considered better in their parenting, which was beautiful to watch. And then watching each of my grandchildren grow and learn. I was thinking when your mother was running around cleaning the bathrooms and so on and so forth, I'm thinking of how many times I probably did that to help you out.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And wash and so on and so forth. I thought, okay, well, just let her do it.
So I was talking about with CMM that part of it is the coordination between people. And I feel like a family conversation is a great place to talk about this because you got a lot of people that you can't control. But I just wondered about what you've learned about interacting and loving people in families, especially trying to coordinate with your families.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's precious, and I think if people can give each other grace and give each other to try to understand, to listen and try to understand where the other person is coming from and to, it's almost like a love languages type thing, and not everybody needs exactly what I need. And I, we've talked a lot about travel, but I really think that travel helps with perspective, helps you realize there are a lot of different people in this world that live in life a lot of different ways, and not everybody grew up at the end of this cul-de-sac, and to see the value in other people and having respect for each other is a huge, huge part, and to let each other grow. I'm not still in 8th grade. We're not frozen in time there. And I think some families do get frozen in time and don't let each other grow. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that Grammie and Grandpa have given us, is allowing us to grow. One of the things I've said many times in my life is that how much I appreciate, I'm no longer practicing the same religion that I grew up in, and I'm not in the same denomination, I should say. And the fact that Grammie and Grandpa were okay with that. So my parents have allowed me to grow. I think I could say that for my brothers as well, and they love me in all these stages and all these ways, and they don't think that I needed to stay, or that they haven't tried to control me.
Yeah.
They continue to love me, even though I've made some choices that are slightly different than theirs. And that's something that I hope I can pass on to you and to your brother. Yeah, you don't have to do it exactly like Dad and I did it.
That's such a good perspective, and it's so nice to share. I don't know that I was so willing to let my children become. One of my lessons that I have perspective on now is I thought that Mike was going to be like Joe.
Your oldest and your second child.
Yes. Yeah. They were different. And that was a good, I don't know why I would have believed that they would be the same. Why would I believe that? It seems silly now. But that helped. But I think as time...
That taught you to see them as their own individuals.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if that's about control or just not knowing or whatever... I didn't really know about boys that much because I only had one brother, but that was good. All that was a good lesson. I think when they decided who they were going to love, that I learned to love and made a decision to love the people that my children decided to love. And then the other transition that was not necessarily easy is that they were going to form their own families and their spouses had families, and so that share and give. Mm-hmm. One of the things I learned is that you didn't have to celebrate Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving.
Yep. Huge gift. That's the other thing I was going to say. Sorry, I'm jumping in,
right.
Mom.
Oh, that's okay.
I mean, one of the greatest gifts my parents have also given, truly, that it's to not lay on guilt.
Yeah.
For missing the scheduled day on the holiday. I mean, we planned in advance. I don't mean that. But you know, you can't be in two states on Christmas Day. They're 550 miles apart to beautifully negotiate and plan.
But you helped with that.
And thank you. And I mean, that is a humongous gift. We don't play the game of trying to make other people feel guilty.
Right, and one of the things that Annie said was, Mom, the good news is that everybody wants to be together, because it's about being together, not necessarily on a given day, mm-hmm. but to celebrate being together, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we were defining ourselves earlier by our relationships.
Right.
A major part of that being family. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you said it earlier, we just do it with family, like you're navigating those relationships and you just figure it out with grace and love and understanding and listening and all the things. And we could choose not to come together around holidays or whenever we choose to. But, you know, if you're comparing family to other relationships, you can maybe let go of other relationships easier than family. Because we define ourselves, at least the three of us were defining ourselves by our relationships. And so if we didn't have those, it makes sense that we would put work into those and care for them. For me, this is why I want to try to understand relationships and the communication that happens, is because they are so important.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, because I think stronger communication, just like giving grace and not doing guilt and having perspective, mm-hmm. you know, and allowing other people to grow. I mean, and caring about communication, you know, I mean, I just think that that's just such a gift. And that is someday is now. And that is thank you for another day to love and be loved. That's all of it.